What's up, B2? Capital G here, talking about a card that I most want to see come off the ban list. And I think for the most part, most people would probably consider this a controversial topic, probably a controversial video. So if I wake up and I see like 300 dislikes, I'm not even going to be that shocked. I'm just like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. It's understandable. The card I'm talking about is Solemn Judgment. And before you dislike the video, allow me to make my case and talk about this topic in detail. So usually YouTubers don't really talk about cards that they just want to see come off the ban list because it kind of reeks of personal bias. You usually see them discuss cards they want off the ban list for three different reasons. Number one, a card has been errated in the OCG, and it's kind of just us sitting around thinking, okay, Konami, are you gonna give us the card back because you already did it in the OCG? Chaos Emperor Dragon would be an example of that. Konami's kind of funny with this. Sometimes they'll errata the cards and they will unban them, like Witch of the Black Forest, and then sometimes they'll just kind of ignore it like they did with Chaos Emperor Dragon. The second time is just kind of fan favorites. You guys know Free Stratos. People bring it up so much that it's a meme at this point. It feels like it's almost lost meaning because it just feels that Konami doesn't want us to have Stratos for whatever reason. But, you know, obviously people bring up the obligatory Stratos. And then the third is a card that really is kind of past its prime and probably wouldn't have nearly the effect on the game that it once had when it was banned. Cards that we just more or less don't think are broken anymore. This would be something like Tribe Infecting Virus. We've seen this multiple times. Tsukiyumi, Magician of Faith, those cards got unbanned. We get all excited, Thousand Eyes Restrict, and then we realize, like, man, these are GOAT format cards, and they not that good anymore. The weird thing is, Solemn Judgment really doesn't fit into any of those categories, right? And it's a very polarizing card because I feel like if you ask TCG players and you ask OCG players their opinion on Solemn Judgment, I feel like you'd get completely different tastes. And it's really interesting because I feel like if you ask TCG players before Solemn got banned in the TCG, their thoughts and opinions on the card, I feel like their answers would be almost identical to what people in the OCG would say about it right this second. And it kind of goes back to when Solemn was legal over here, its reputation was so positive, guys. It's one of the strangest things. When Solemn was legal, it was almost unilaterally loved. I mean, the card's reputation was impeccable, and it's because people largely consider Solemn one of the most skillful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and even by today's standards, I would admit that Solemn definitely still qualifies for that description. I think that if Solemn Judgment just came back tomorrow, it would automatically be one of the most skillful cards. It's because of the obvious. Solemn can basically stop everything. That's where the old meme came from, you know, God says no, but at the same time, you know, its activation cost is incredibly high. If you have 8,000 life points, it costs you 4,000, which is more than all the other commonly played Solemn cards. And it's generally looked at, this is the main point, it's generally looked at it's generally looked at as a card that can be your beacon to victory if you use it properly. I mean, it can be the green light for you to push your playthrough and you can basically win, but if you use it at the wrong time or if you have a bad decision, you end up hitting the wrong card with Solemn, then it will be the instrument of your own demise, right? And the reason that I bring up Solemn's reputation is because I feel like that directly impacts how people still look at Solemn Judgment today, even though it was banned all the way back in the 5Ds era, right? And I'm going to explain to you why Solemn's reputation went from incredibly good, like, you know, impeccable, to a lot of people started not to really like Solemn that much. It's actually, it goes back to Kevin Tewart. He made a very ominous post on Pojo.com and the forums where he was kind of describing a card, and he says, you know, I think we need to all be honest here. There's a certain card that players like to call extremely skillful, but we need to just accept that the card was broken. And he posted that, and then a few weeks later, Solemn Judgment got banned, and it was like, whoa, that was definitely him prophesizing, or, you know, him kind of hinting at Solemn Judgment getting banned in the TCG. And it kind of seemed like after that, a lot of players started to talk down about Solemn. They were like, man, that card was really broken. It should have been gone a long time ago because of obviously the power of the card. And I've always thought of Solemn as obviously an incredibly sharp double-edged sword because it does have the power to stop everything, but at the same time, it can obviously cost you duels. If you look at different eras of Yu-Gi-Oh, that will definitely hold true. In fact, that's the reason that I want Solemn Judgment to come back now. One of the reasons that Solemn Judgment was held down ad nauseum in the GX era was because of one single card, and that card was Ring of Destruction. Yeah, there were other factors like Snatch Steal, that was a big one too. But no card held Solemn Judgment down more than Ring of Destruction, because obviously if you Solemn Judgment early in the game, you'd be at 4,000 life points, and then your opponent could summon something that was just even a moderately sized monster like a Monarch or something. They attack you with the Monarch, they flip over Ring after they've done the damage, and then you lose. Even if there's something like a simple Stratos, like summon Stratos, attack you, ring it, you only have 400 life points left. If I have anything else on the board in the battle phase, you automatically lose. And the reason that I bring that up is because it shows you the potential risk of Solemn Judgment, and that risk was so real that, as I said in my Yu-Gi-Oh story about CO Burn, that was really the only deck that like historically ran Solemns as an absolute staple in GX. One of the reasons why I think Solemn should come back now is because the pace of the game is so ridiculously fast, and this is not something you guys can argue about. You guys have seen the plays of Spirals when they pop off and their opponent doesn't have a hand trap, or have you guys actually like sat through, you know, and a Pendulum player's turn when they have like Heavy Metaphors Electrum? I mean, you can literally just go to your fridge, make a sandwich, play a couple of games of like Solitaire in the time that it takes them just to do their basic like Heavy Metaphors Electrum plays. It takes them like 8 minutes to complete the turn. What I'm basically alluding to is that the game is so much faster now than it was in 5Ds and during, you know, GX. Like, I'm not really sure that Solemn would do anything, and that's the reason why a lot of people don't play Solemn in the OCG. Like, if you use Solemn early in a turn, there is such a high probability of your opponent being able to OTK your ass. I feel like Solemn Judgment is... it's basically a risk that I'm not really sure that it's worth the reward right now. I mean, if your opponent uses something like Brilliant Fusion, do you Solemn that? Because if they have another, you know, starter card that doesn't require their normal summon, or let's just say that you do Solemn Judgment their normal summon, like you Solemn a Candina. What if they have a Gofu? I mean, you're basically going to, you might die that turn. You know, if you Solemn Judgment a Brilliant Fusion and they happen to have, you know, another card like a Venus or something that they normal summon. If you're playing against the World Chalice deck, you're most certainly going to lose in that turn. And I kind of look at Solemn Judgment, right? I compare it a lot to a card like Soul Charge, and it's really interesting because I feel like they're different sides of the same coin. They're kind of a yin and yang. They're polar opposites, but I think that they're very comparable. So I like to think of Soul Charge as a card that is basically the epitome of creation in Yu-Gi-Oh! Whatever your deck's best play is, whatever awesome boss monsters you can pump out, Soul Charge makes all of those things a possibility. In fact, Soul Charge at its peak is basically only limited by your own imagination. And you guys know the ideal situations I'm talking about: having a whole bunch of monsters in your graveyard and then having a whole bunch of life points to facilitate Soul Charge summoning back those monsters. And actually, Soul Charge is arguably stronger now because we have 6 monster zones that you can use instead of the old 5. But you guys know, like, when you resolve a Soul Charge under those circumstances, man, you can summon everything in your extra deck and you can just pop off as hard as you want. And a lot of times when you see those triple Quasar plays, you know, a lot of times there's a Soul Charge in there somewhere. So I look at Soul Charge and I'm like, it gives you the power of all creation. You can make whatever you want. And I look at Solemn and I'm just thinking that's kind of the opposite, right? Like, Solemn gives you the power of all destruction. It doesn't matter what monster your opponent summons, Solemn it. It doesn't matter what spell or trap your opponent throws at you. If it's continuous, if it's a counter trap, spell speed 1, 2, 3, Solemn says for the right amount of life points, I'm going to negate anything. And it's like, I don't know, I find those to just be kind of proportional for some strange reason. And I think I know what the biggest pushback is going to be, because it's a common counter argument when it comes to Solemn Judgment. It's not a new argument at all. People have been using it since the days of like 5Ds and whatnot. And it's that Solemn Judgment is always a live card. No matter what your life points are, even if you have 1 life point, you can activate Solemn Judgment, because unlike the other commonly used Solemn counter traps, it does not have a hard number attached to it. No specific number. It's not like Solemn Strike or Solemn Scolding, Solemn Warning, where if you don't have X amount of life points, you just cannot activate the card. But that's looking at, in my opinion, that's kind of looking at Solemn at its peak. That's looking at just the upside, and it's kind of ignoring the downside. You know, the downside is, yeah, if you use Solemn early in a duel, it's going to cost you 4,000 life points, and using 3 copies of Solemn Strike only costs you 4,500 life points. So I don't know, I feel like you have to look at both sides of Solemn Judgment. I mean, would you rather, if your opponent just normal summons an ALEISTER, would you rather use Solemn Strike on it, or would you rather use Solemn Judgment? argument because, man, if you use Solemn Strike on it and your opponent has a couple of other cards that are, you know, starter cards, playmaking cards, you might take a bunch of damage. Maybe you're in what I like to call the danger zone, under 2,000 life points where one attack KOs you, but you're not dead. In the situation where you Solemn Judgment the ALEISTER, man, if your opponent has like a Gofu and an Invocation, like, you're dead, bro. Like, if you don't have some other like crazy hand trap or other cards to support your play, you're basically dead. And I don't know, I feel like Solemn would just make the game a little more interesting. I would even be willing to, you know, give up maybe a copy or a couple of copies of Solemn Strike to get Solemn Judgment back. I feel like it's time, and I'm not really arguing that Solemn Judgment has gotten weaker because it really hasn't. I'm just arguing that the risk reward is, in my opinion, just as high right now as it was during GX when Ring of Destruction was legal, because there are just so many, like, there are so many playmaking cards, and doing 4,000 damage right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so incredibly easy. You know, decks don't need their normal summon to do it, and there are so many just cards that can amass so much damage, and Brilliant Fusion and Gofu and Scapegoat, and you guys know the cards I'm talking about, cards that can put a lot of damage on board. So what do you guys think? With Solemn Judgment coming back, this is actually the bigger question that I wanted to ask in the video, not, you know, would you like Solemn Judgment to come back, but the bigger question I would like to ask is, if Solemn Judgment came back, and I'm not talking about at 3, so don't even bring that up, I'm talking about at limited status as it is in the OCG, if Solemn Judgment came back at 1 in the TCG, do you guys think that that would benefit the game, or would it be kind of a detriment? I feel like it would just be, I feel like it would be a benefit. I would really love, man, I'd really love to to play the new Solemn package. I remember the days of 5Ds playing what they called the Solemn Brigade, and I guess you can still call today's Solemns the Solemn Brigade, but I would like to get, you know, a copy of Solemn Judgment, Solemn Strike, and Solemn Warning in a deck. Like, I think that that would be pretty cool. Whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about banned cards, and Solemn Judgment is just one that I'd really like to come back, but it's not for the standard reason, so I felt like kind of making a video about it and seeing what everybody thinks. Anyways, whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.